Hello out there. Hello.
Hello, Tracy.
Just checking this speaker. Is it on? Does this thing work?
This is Stuart. I can hear you.
Excellent. All the way from the Dakotas.
The frozen tundra.
How much snow do you have?
No, mostly it's been freezing rain the last 2 days.
Oh, that's the worst. I'd rather have the snow.
I think so too. It's making the highways rather dangerous around here.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you could join us today.
Me too.
I think I saw where you had some other staff joining as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I hadn't heard from any of them, so.
Oh. Well, we should get started here. I want to try and start as close to time as I can. Got a lot of material to cover.
Hello?
Hello.
I was just checking in, make sure I did it right.
You did. You're with us.
All right, perfect. Awesome. All right.
I see you there.
I couldn't sneak in and set the camera, huh?
It was a nice try.
You've shaved since Ohio.
That was just this morning.
Oh, was it? Oh, goodness.
Something new.
Yeah, that's fun to do. Well, hopefully everyone can hear me. On my little printout or readout on my computer, it's saying straight up 12 o'clock. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Being our first webinar, I'm very interested to see kind of how it will flow with folks being able to log in, utilize the GoToMeeting, and then likewise just to see, you know, what y'all think about this type of delivery system. So here we go. Hi, Patty. Patty just joined us. All right, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead now. Go to our next slide. All right, well, as the advertisement indicated, my name is Tracy Reveal. I think I know most of you. I'll be your facilitator today, doing this on behalf of the International Association of Corrections Training Personnel. Basically, this is one of your member benefits. So when you pay those dues every year, this is one, I guess, I don't want to say freebie because you paid your dues, but it's something that we want to be able to offer our membership so that they can, in turn, continue to learn new stuff from other trainers, because that's not easy to get that kind of information. Oftentimes, we're just responsible for pushing the training out to everybody else, and it's hard to find training for us. So this particular session today has some performance objectives in it that are specific to the jobs that you do in training and delivering training. So I'm glad everybody could join us today. So to get started very quickly, I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple features of the GoToMeeting system. So just to give you a very, very quick overview of what you're looking at there on your screen, you'll see on its right-hand side, and you'll see a title called Attendees, and that's our participant roster. You can scroll up and down and see who's joined us to take part in today's session, and we'll do a little roll call here in a minute. As you can see now, you're probably looking at the PowerPoint that supports our discussion for today. And then likewise on that right-hand side is our chat room. So I really want to encourage everybody who's taking part today that if you have a question, please post your question in the chat room. That way, Michael Jones, who's with us today, he's kind of the wizard behind the curtain. He's helping to manage this webinar, and he'll be helping me to keep an eye on the posted questions so that way I don't miss answering anything that you might want to know. Now there's a functionality button. You see the little microphone that's on your kind of your toolbar. If it's green and you're using the computer headphones and such, you're live. You got a hot mic. You can toggle that on and off to mute yourself, and basically all of us are going to stay muted throughout the discussion until it comes time for maybe some chat, internal questions are posed and we want to discuss, what we're doing maybe in our particular area. So green is on, red is off, and please mute to avoid any distractions, background noises, and so forth. This system actually has the ability to share screens. I don't know that we're going to be doing that today. I'm sharing my screen with Michael and all of you. So that's probably the extent of our screen sharing, but I wasn't really sure how many of you delivered meetings or had meetings and delivered training over systems like this. Maybe it's WebEx or maybe it's GoToMeeting, but this is the format that Iactp has adopted to roll out these webinars. So we're, again, and what we'll do is go down the list. And as we go down the list, tell us who you are, what state you represent, and your discipline area. So for example, if you're from a training academy, say training academy, or if you are representing jails or colleges, let us know that. And then ultimately, what do you hope to get out of today's session? So looking at my attendee list from the top, we have Miss Jeanette Arbogast. Jeanette, would you like to go first?
Good morning. My name is Jeanette Arbogast. I am a district manager for the Wyoming Department of Corrections Probation and Parole. I'm located in Riverton, Wyoming. And let's see, I'm participating in this webinar today because I'm a part of a work group that we're trying to put together a training for staff who might be interested in a leadership role. And one of the competencies we're looking at is the challenges across different generations. We're entering a phase where we're having almost 5 different generations in the workforce. So I'm really excited about what's going to be presented here today.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. Mr. Stuart Baumgartner.
Good morning, Tracy. This is Stuart. I'm from out here in the frozen tundra in North Dakota with the adult corrections facilities out here. Just wanted to be part of this thing and listen to what the wonderful doctor has to say to us today.
Well, thank you. You're too kind. Everyone, if you don't know, through some of our correspondence, our journal and so forth, Stu is actually our newest board member, and he's taking the vacancy of Mike Dooley, who represented adult corrections facilities, prisons. So we're very glad to have Stu. He's a training director, got that experience. We're definitely glad to have his new ideas on the board. There's Stu. Freshly shaved too. Let's see. Thanks, Stu. Now we have Debbie Black.
Hi, I'm from St. Joe, Missouri, Western Region Training Center, and I'm just here to learn more.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us. Let's see, Tammy Brammer.
Yes, ma'am. I am from the West Virginia Division of Corrections, and I am a facility trainer, but I work for the academy, and would just like to get some help on having some issues not being able to get through to all staff.
Okay, I need you to repeat where you're from and what you hope to get out of the course.
I'm from the West Virginia Division of Corrections.
Okay.
Did it come through?
Yes, West Virginia. I got you, everybody. And what was it you hoped to get out of this, Tammy?
We just have some issues trying to understand our younger generation.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, and we're going to definitely talk about that. So I want to thank you for joining us for the session today.
Thank you.
Moving on down, looks like we have a couple callers. We'll come back to them because obviously we don't know who they are. They've not signed in yet. Lana Jackson. Lana, are you still with us? Looks like her mic's on. Lana, jump in anytime. How about Melody Norris?
Yep, I'm here. I'm from the Wyoming Medium Correctional Institution in Torrington, Wyoming.
Okay.
And along with Jeanette Arbogast, I'm on the same work group as her, looking to get some more insight on the generational differences and add maybe some of what we learn here to our work group.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you. Patty Robertson.
Oh, hello, everybody. How are you? I am formerly with Adult Pro in Cleveland, Ohio, and I don't know if some of you attended the conference in Cleveland, but our last speaker said to go out and pursue our passion. So I am quote unquote retired from the agency now, and I'm going to go out and do that after 31 years of service to the state. And I am at this webinar because I want to know what the current trends are regarding the generations. I know that over time things change and attitudes change. And as I go out into my new life, I want to be prepared and gain insight from my fellow corrections employees.
Okay, excellent. Well, congratulations on your retirement.
Thanks. It's weird. I'm telling you, it's weird not working.
I can only imagine. All right. And Mr. Pete Norris. Hello, Pete. All right, I know Pete's probably out there somewhere with us. Reggie Jackson.
Hello, everyone. Reggie Jackson from Northeast Reintegration Center here in the great Cleveland, Ohio. Welcome to all from the land, as I call it. I'm here today. We have a older staff that's transitioning out into the rest of their lives. So one of the challenges we're facing here at Northeast is the new younger generation coming in and trying to find out new tools that I can use in order to bridge a communication gap between our existing staff with the trend of new staff coming in.
Well, Reggie, you kind of hit the nail on the head there with the transitioning workforce and the communication gap that exists. We're going to be talking about all those things. So I'm definitely glad that you could join us today. Thanks a lot. Mr. Rodriguez.
Hey.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Rodriguez. I'm from the state of Missouri. I work for the Missouri Department of Corrections. I work at the Training Academy as a, everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm also the regional training manager for the Department of Corrections on the Western region. So I also train, so I teach supervisors. I've taught the generations classes. We offer it to our line staff, and we also offer it to supervisors. And we're actually currently in the middle of updating our lesson plans. So currently I've just been doing a lot of research on different generations, specifically millennials, and trying to get more insight, and because that's going to be our new workforce as we Generation X and Boomers start retiring an all-time high. We're looking at how we're going to replace them, but also make sure we get them ready to take over when we move on. So Just looking for more information.
Absolutely, and I'm definitely going to be able to give you some more information because as you are looking to revise your curriculum, one of the main things you can look to include is a cohort group that we're going to discuss today, and that's known as the I generation. They come after the millennials, and we'll get into a lot of detail about this new emerging group of folk that are entering our workforce. So, Rosalie Morin.
Hi, Rosalie Morin. I'm from Charleston, Maine, and I have Marsha Higgins also here with me to do this meeting. And we're joining, we both coordinate training, me for staff and Marsha for volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're just more hoping to get some information to see how we can incorporate some of these things, not just into the training, but, into, how we're coaching staff on the job and maybe some practices that we put together that can make things easier. Because, we've got the older staff, we've got some that are coming right out of high school, and there's a lot of differences.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Well, thank you both for joining us. All right, now we do have, let me check. I think I checked off all the names. We have a couple folks that are joining us that we don't have names for, so let us know who you are out there in phone land. Hello? I need to ask Michael. Michael, are you picking anything up for this person that's trying to talk with us?
Pardon, Tracy?
Did you hear anything from the person that is out there but we don't have a name for?
No, I'm not sure who that would be.
Okay. I see some green lights, green phones, and now a talking speaker, but it doesn't look as though we can bring those folks in. So if you can, folks that can't audibly talk with us, please go into the chat box and type in your name. Just type in your information, and we'll definitely be able to include you at least through the texting mode or the typing mode in the chat box. Kind of is befitting to our conversation today, honestly. So keep the things rolling. I came across this picture as I was putting this presentation together, and I just kind of wondered, have y'all ever had one of those days where, there's kind of bickering going on all around you and you just kind of get in the middle of it and strike your best yoga, or you want to strike your best yoga pose and just kind of phone out. Nobody's communicating on the same wavelength, and everything that happens is a cause for drama. And that type of conflict in the workplace or that type of day can be caused by a lot of different things in our business of corrections. Perhaps you didn't have an instructor, as far as training goes, perhaps you didn't have an instructor show up for your 8 o'clock class. Maybe your computer system, you've got all your PowerPoints and all your student materials on a server folder, and all of a sudden the server folder is not available, the program or the system's offline, and you've got a training to offer. You start to get in that panic mode, or it could be something a little less direct in terms of the equipment. But what about those days when it's snowing outside, and I think a lot of you are dealing with that already, and you've got those long commutes, and by the time you get to work your nerves are already shot, and then you have to go in and teach and work with folks and be personable. I think you probably get the picture. So today what we're going to do is we're going to focus on basically one topic that is the cause for a lot of conflict in our workplace, and that is generational differences. And the reason this has been such a hot topic for over a decade now is because our workforce is continuously changing, not only in corrections, but across the country. And so with all that change, employees who have these different attitudes, they have different value systems, they have different beliefs. You know, not only do they vary in age, but they vary also in their cultural experiences. And when you pile all that together, is it any wonder that we have conflict? Absolutely not. So there are four primary things that I'd like us to focus on today. And it'll begin by talking about the differences between what is a generational influence as opposed to what is a cultural influence, and how do the two interact. We'll also spend some time discussing some identifiers or characteristics, if you will, for the different cohorts in the workplace. And then we'll start to move forward with the application of the information that we just discussed about the 5 groups, and we'll analyze what, as you know, folks that are helping drive the organization's operations and training, we also influence the culture. So we're going to talk about, you know, what do we need to consider as we're doing that, respective of this topic of the, you know, different generations. And then, so all these, and likewise, we're going to talk about the training component. So managing relationships and communication, of course, is really kind of what this session is all about. Because the bottom line is, if we ignore the differences, it'll lead to conflict, it'll lead to stressed relationships, as opposed to if we work with the differences, recognize and know what they are, we can tap those individuals for their creativity. It'll definitely build a better spirit of camaraderie and teamwork and cooperation. And from an HR perspective, we'll address some things in terms of recruitment, retention, turnover, and that will just be very, very brief because we only have very short time together. So we're primarily going to focus on the latter two SPOs. So to get started, I wanted to provide you with a definition of cohort groups. And basically, these are individuals that share and reflect major influences of their times. And typically, we look at those influences as things that occurred during their formative years. So you're thinking about, you know, not only growing up into the teens, but presumably also into the early 20s, because you're still developing as a young adult. You're still forming your values, your belief systems, and so forth. And a lot of these things, when we talk about cohorts, the bullets that are represented represent some of the things that influence the different cohorts. And cohorts is a term that I'm going to use to refer to the groups that we'll be talking about that exist in the workplace. The veterans, the boomers, the Xers, the millennials, and the iGen. So things like catastrophes, wars, and defining events, as we go through, this is one of those sessions that I want to be cautious and not go over too many characteristics, because it sounds like many of you have already had some form of multi-generational workforce training. Just as a show of hands, if you can, and this is just kind of getting familiar with the system and how it works, can you go into your control panel over on your right-hand side, and if you've participated in some type of multi-gen training in the past, let us know. Give us an affirmative. I see Stuart says yes. Reggie says yes. Yes, 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 yes. Excellent. All right. Well, for those responses, and it looks like the majority of our folk have, I'm going to not spend a lot of time going about saying, okay, this is a veteran cohort. These are the things that influence them and makes them who they are today, or how they presented in the workforce, because that has been in the past. Most generational courses focus on just that content. And I want to try to give you maybe some other ways to consider the generations. So as we go through this discussion today, there's going to be some caveats that we want to keep in mind. And this holds true as we move from one group to the next. We're going to make some broad stroke statements, generalizations about each group, but we're going to be careful not to stereotype, because there are no absolutes. No person fits into a group perfectly, if you will. There are a lot of other influencing factors that have to be taken into consideration. Everybody has their unique traits and characteristics. We have different regions of the country that we come from. We have different cultures that we come from. All that also has to be taken into consideration. So I want you to, as we go through our discussion today, think about your organization. Think about your process. Maybe you're a manager. Maybe you're the person that just makes training happen. But what is your style in terms of interacting with other people and communicating with other people? So here's an example of one of our caveats. As soon as I get there we go. This is a communications example. So you can take a look at that little picture. And so on the left-hand side of your screen, you have an employee who's, used to things like floppy disks, VHS, tape, 8-tracks, mini cassettes. And then over here on the right, you've got this younger employee who's all about the social media, the cell phones, thumb drives as opposed to the floppy disk. Their whole experience is different at perhaps the same period of time. A teenager who was born in the 50s and the 60s had a very different set of experiences than those who've grown up during the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. And that's a societal change piece that we're going to, be covering as well. So the 5 cohorts that we see coming kind of together in our workforce today consist of the veterans, the baby boomers, the Xers, millennials, and this new group that has emerged called the I generation. Now, I'm using the date ranges that are provided by Dr. Jean Twenge, Twenge. She's one of my most favorite authors on this subject. And she has published, I think, just some really research-based information about this youngest generation of folks that's coming in our doors as new hires. So we're going to spend most of our time kind of getting into that content. So if you think about the different age ranges, someone who's in that generation, we have some of them working for us already, because someone who's born in 95 is, 22 now? So a lot of our agencies start allowing folks to hire in, maybe not at an officer's position, but other positions at the age of 18. And then when you think about our millennial group, they're not necessarily the babies or the newbies on the block anymore. We've been, like I said, we've been talking about this subject for about a decade, and they were always the youngest group that we covered. And so the millennials now range from age 23 to age 37. So they're getting up there. And then there's our Gen Xers, and the Gen Xers are between 38, 52 years old, while our baby boomers are between 53 and 71. So depending on the literature that you review regarding this subject, you may see different age ranges for these given cohort groups. So I just wanted to share with you the information, though, about Dr. Twenge, because she is one of the reference or resources that I use heavily as, we built this session. So let's see here. Let me back up. Getting ahead of myself. Just how Jen are you? I want to take a minute here and have you answer some of these questions. I'd like for you to, on a piece of paper, unless, of course, you can print screen and you want to do that and answer it, but you can actually pull it off by just having a sheet of notebook paper and jotting down a Y or an N, yes or a no, to these questions. So in the past 24 hours, did you spend at least an hour texting on the phone? Do you have a Snapchat account? Do you consider yourself a religious person? Did you get your driver's license by the time you were 17? Do you think same-sex marriage should be legal? And did you ever drink alcohol more than a few sips by the time you turned 16? So, everybody got those pretty well? If anybody needs those up for a minute, just holler, let me know. I'm trying to watch our little sidebar over here, just to make sure. So, moving on. Number 7, did you fight with your parents a lot when you were a teen? Were more than a third of the other students at your high school a different race than yourself? When you were in high school, did you spend about every week and night with your friends? And did you have a job during the school year when you were in high school? Now this one you got to read kind of slowly. Do you agree that safe spaces and trigger warnings are good ideas and that efforts should be made to reduce microaggressions? And finally, are you politically independent or apolitical independent as it reads? And then lastly, do you support the legalization of marijuana? Are y'all getting a sense of where we're going here? Is having sex without much emotion involved desirable? And when you were in high school, did you feel left out and lonely fairly often? So, you should have 15 yeses or nos based on our questions. And what I'd like you to do now is go back and circle number 1, number 2, number 5, number 8, and 11 through 15. So if on those questions you have answered yes, give yourself 1 point for each answer. On the remaining questions, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, and 10, if you answered a no, give yourself 1 point. And then add up your points. All right. Type in our chat what your totals were. All right, the polls are in, at least those that have reported. It looks like of our little group here this afternoon, the most iGen person, or the person that relates most closely with the iGeneration is none other than Stuart Bumgardner, followed closely by Lana Jackson. So that's just a fun little tool to kind of put you in the mindset of what we're going to be looking at when we get to this iGeneration, because all those things, as you were reading them, and you're kind of like, wow, you know, they're asking this. These are things that are kind of at the front of the discussions with these young generations. So the difference, this is one of our performance objectives, the differences between cultural influences and generational influences. Basically, when we get into this discussion, you look down through the bullet points. When you compare one generation to another, when they're at the same age, okay, that can tell us more about individual differences teenagers at XYZ high school, and they told us that you know, what's trending today is this. Well, there's no comparative group, okay? And that's the key with a lot of the research that you should be looking at to ground your curricula, because you want to be able to see, for example, that they perhaps they're surveying the first year freshmen that are entering a four-year college. That is something that actually the American Freshman Survey does. It's administered by the Higher Ed Research Institute. And this thing has been conducted since 1966. So can you imagine? Every year since 1966, this higher education survey has collected the thoughts, the attitudes, the values, the beliefs of incoming freshmen. Now, that is a good way to cross-compare the differences, similarities within the generations. Now, culturally, we have cultural differences have many causes, and as you can imagine, we did mention some of those earlier. It could pertain to where you were raised, how you were raised, who raised you. So we have to consider too influencing trends that were going on for that group. And one that we'll talk about as we get into the iGeneration is the influence that the technology has had and how that's going to end up shaping our culture, not just the generational group of iGen folks, but how it's going to influence our entire culture. So let's talk about our veterans. Excuse me. Now, of course, our veterans, sometimes they're referred to as the mature, the golden generation, the traditionalists. They are all about respect for authority. They're very conservative because obviously they're coming off of the time when their relatives and such were, surviving the Depression. So they're frugal folks. They're hardworking folks. So just some little information about them as a cohort group. Now, granted, there's fewer and fewer of them in the workforce today, but it's still relevant to our discussion. They were influenced, again, by a lot of different things when you think about it. There was the wars. There was a lot of significant people of their era that also influenced them. So we'll move on now to the baby boomers. I think if I had my choice, I'll come back as a boomer somehow, some way in life. The boomers, I feel, are just a kind of a really eclectic, fun group. They are, however, when you go back to some of your old trainings, you'll probably remember that they were referred to as workaholics. They were all about, you know, climbing the corporate ladder, getting the best and, you know, highest position that they could possibly get. They're very driven, but yet they remain optimistic, and they're all about teamwork. Now, they're still, they used to be the majority of the workforce, but now they're retiring or they're preparing to retire. If you remember back kind of the ages that they are, it's said that with this exodus of baby boomers, and I know Reggie talked about this in respect to his facility, with the baby boomers leaving, it's going to create a little bit of a brain drain, organizational knowledge gap, if you will, when they leave. And it's also said that when the baby boomers leave, that there's going to be more jobs than people to fill them, which is obviously a little bit of a concern. It's always interesting to me when folks say they can't find jobs today, and yet there's so many out there that go unfilled. Now our Xers are our latchkey kids. They used to be called the slackers, but now that they're older, that name, they've kind of shed that name. So they're a group that, you know, they're not impressed by authority. You got to show me what you know, and prove your leadership, as opposed to expecting me to write on your title kind of thing. Very different from the generational groups before them that, you know, if you had the title, it was automatic, you know, it was kind of a chain of command thing. Now, granted, in our organization, correctional organization, you know, it tends to be very hierarchical, but these younger generations are not into that, obviously. They're into a more relaxed structure. As I move to millennials, one of the things that millennials and Xers have in common is the need to have a flexible work environment. Not only the relaxed environment, but a flexible environment, because when you think about their age ranges, they're the ones that are in the prime of, you know, getting married, having their children, and they need that kind of latitude in order to kind of have it all, to be able to, you know, have their children, have a job, pay the bills, and still make it to the soccer matches. Now, our millennials, again, they used to be the youngest group. They're not anymore. Because they're very ambitious in the workforce, as we're finding out. You know, the Xers and the closely followed by the millennials represent the majority of our current day workforce. So the millennials are all about, you know, looking at different ways that they can better position themselves. And it's not necessarily about the hierarchical climb on the ladder as much as it is, and I've often referred to this as a spider web, that they want to build their own skills. So they may hop laterally from one position to another position just to, you know, again, expand that resume. And so in the end, when you're looking at the correction system, you know, you may have somebody that wants to, I guess, go into supervision, go into a leadership position, and they want to be as, I guess, experienced and diverse as they can be. So anymore, it's not uncommon to see people hopping from operations over to programs, maybe over to like the business side of the house. So they have the background about budgeting and so forth. The millennials aren't afraid to take on those challenges. So just kind of something else to consider. So what is this whole I generation thing? I can tell you that it stands for a whole lot of different things. It can stand for individualism. This is something that this group is known for. If you think about this group in their clothing, they are a group that when we were in school, perhaps, it was all about, keeping up with the current trends and having the pair of jeans or the pair of tennis shoes that were the hot ticket at that time. Well, with this generation, they're more about, I guess, representing themselves as individuals. So where there may have been one pair of jeans in the 80s, there's 12 now, and they just pick the pair that fits their personality. And this whole individualism thing kind of grounds their sense of equality and entitlement. If you think about this younger group, they kind of do have that air about them. And they tend to reject traditional social roles. And we'll talk about what that means here in a second. Now, here's something. I'm sure you all figured this one out. Internet generation. The internet became commercialized in 1995. And this was the very beginning of the iGen cohort group. This is when they're beginning to be born. The oldest members of iGen were adolescents when the iPhone was produced in 2007. Now think about the iGen cohort group. Do you ever see them without their iPhone or their smartphone in their hands? So one of the other things that really helped influence our culture was that by 2011, 2012, the majority of Americans began to own their own cell phones. That wasn't necessarily the case when you look back to the 90s, the 80s, and so on. Because, the internet had to be accessed over a desktop up until that time. And once those smartphones came out, then all of a sudden you can surf the web wherever you're at, on the bus, riding from one point to another, and not needing that desktop anymore. So that sudden shift had a huge impact. And then you got to think about the social media side of it. In 2006, Facebook opened up to pretty much anyone over the age of 13. So those who were born since 1993 have been able to live their entire adolescence on social networking sites. Now, there's obviously a lot of concern around some of those right now, but there's an impact as to them doing that. It has a ripple effect from everything from social interactions to their mental health. And, we're currently at the forefront, this group is at the forefront of what's considered to be the worst mental health crisis in decades. There's significant rates of teen depression. The suicide rates have skyrocketed since 2011. And folks are doing tons of research to try and figure out, some sort of causal link. We can surmise a lot of things about the whole influence of the internet and the smartphones. We can, surmise that, with the social interactions piece, the effect of that is that there's little. And by having little, they bring those little social skills to us as employers, when they come looking for jobs. Now, this iGen group, if you think about it, they've had violence all around them as they've been growing up. And so there's the violence factor that leads to some safety concerns, if you will. But then there's also, and it's also led to them being the most protected group, by the way, babies on board and so forth. But then you've got economic concerns that, they are seeing their futures as very bleak. And, they're concerned about being able to make the kind of money that they need to make to pay off the student loans, in addition to starting a family, having a piece of property or a car. So there's kind of a double-edged piece there regarding their future, and there's how they would feel in terms of like a security component, a fiscal and regarding the violence. And then likewise, this is a group that has a lot of patience, you know, and they're very open-minded. They are absolutely the most diverse generation that we have had to date. They have some tremendous ideas about gender, race, and sexual orientation that were unheard of. You know, if you were to lay those alongside of the trends or the boomers, and it's just continuously started to change as we've progressed. So good and bad come with this group. If you want to apply some more eyes to this I generation, here's some other things that you can kind of look at and think about. So we say they're not in a hurry. And I don't know if any of you have some of these I generation folk in your home or perhaps related to you some way. What we're seeing is an extension of their childhood. They're growing up more slowly. 18-year-olds are acting like 15-year-olds, and 13-year-olds are acting like 10-year-olds. And a lot of that has been because of that protective helicopter parent that the Gen Xers became as a result of all the violence in the world. They want to, you know, protect their child. So they're physically safer than the other generations, but they're more mentally vulnerable. We talked a little bit about them having very little in-person interaction and the phones replacing that, in addition to those insecurities about their economic future. This group is what is called irreligious in a lot of respects, because there's been a decline in alignment with the more, I guess, structured religious groups during the period of time that they've been growing up. With regards to insulated, we're saying that we mean they're safer, but they're not as civically inclined as what their predecessor, the millennials, have been. Now, when we say indefinite, it goes back to that notion of new and different attitudes about sex and relationships and having children. And then with respect to inclusiveness, you know, we're looking at, you know, acceptance, equality, being able to have free speech. And so they're kind of all over the board with things. I thought the cartoon was kind of apropos for our discussion today. You know, it says, without contact, there's no empowerment. And in a world of fragmentation, connection is our obsession. And so, you know, if you think about that, we're cutting off our own contact by and large with all this technology and shaping our whole culture, not just these youngins. And so it's become an obsession to the point that, you know, are we using it because there's all this craziness in the world? Is that our way to kind of either keep track, escape? I don't know. So, excuse me. Oh, we've already done this. So let's ask, do you have a generationally friendly workforce? How do you know? How do we move toward becoming more generationally friendly? We have to ask folks about their needs and their preferences. And in training, we largely do that through training needs assessment. But how is your training needs assessment structured? Are you actually asking for folks' preferences and their needs? Or is your training needs assessment going out and it's a fill in the box, provide no feedback, and you're basically asking questions that you already know the answer to? So there's a huge difference there. And I want to skip down here to, I guess, from a management perspective. Do you know what the composition of your current workforce is? Are you surrounding yourself with yes people, or are you surrounding yourself with those that'll provide new ideas and creativity as you work on maybe special projects? And how do we get to that friendly workforce. A couple of ways involves us talking openly about what we want from our jobs. Having that minimal amount of bureaucracy obviously is helpful too. We have to have that relaxed and informal work atmosphere because, again, that's the preference of the younger workers. The younger workers want to have fun at work, which is completely difficult, I understand, in our business. But that's just one of those, I guess, things that we have to be mindful of. I mean, those opportunities can be made. And we're known for being straightforward with each other. And so having that generationally friendly workforce involves being straightforward with each other and having the ability to have those free exchanges. Here's some other considerations as we think about working with the different generational groups. All these things help improve communication, and that in turn helps improve our teamwork. And improved teamwork, of course, well, that leads to helping us be more effective or more efficient, depending upon, of course, what field you're in. And any observations or concerns that you have need to be brought to the attention of the folks who can make things happen, you know, to impact or change whatever may be wrong. But does the people that are running your organization and making decisions about how your organization functions, do they represent the workforce as a whole? And I pose that question because we tend to still find a lot of corrections agencies that have a leadership representation, maybe even at the very high executive level, that is not representative of all the folk that work there and make the wheels go round every day. And that's problematic because we can't accomplish a lot of the things on this list because of not having that, I guess, diverse ability, that diverse representation of ideas. So what are the implications? And these are some things that I'd like for you to consider. Number one, what does the current culture of your work area or your agency say about the recognition of employee needs? As trainers, we indirectly, non-verbally can do that through our training needs assessments, you know, depending on how you set it up. If you actually ask for input and you leave those fill in the blank boxes, that is truly getting at, you know, soliciting the information employee needs. Does your agency say that its staff are their greatest resource, but then they fail to show it? You know, that kind of feeds into that same notion about recognizing what staff need. Do your practices and policies, and you know, do you have certain groups that take advantage of some opportunities and not others? You know, do you see some segments of our workforce that utilize tuition reimbursement opportunities, others don't? Do you know why? And I asked previously, you know, what's the composition or the demographics of your staff? As people that work in training and staff development, having that information will help you make decisions. You know, it'll help you know how to better direct your curriculum. You know, what are your stats, in other words, on the breakdown of the different cohort groups? And what impact does all this generational stuff have on recruiting employees, retaining employees? And of course, that's, you know, retention, turnover, that is a huge, huge issue. That's almost a course in itself. We've actually addressed that in almost a half a day. But this whole notion of being able to properly prepare folks as they're entering the workforce has a significant, you know, impact on whether or not they stay. So we have to be careful as we're doing all this, of course, to still balance the needs of the organization alongside of what the staff needs are. So the cost benefit, a lot of folks think that, you know, we've got these older, you know, employees. This is an example. So what do you think would have the most cost benefit? Training older workers or training new hires? Well, the kind of the long and short of it is, there's a lot of money that gets invested in the startup cost of onboarding somebody into an agency. And there's very little evidence that supports that, or the suggestion that older workers are not as productive as younger workers. So got to think about some of these ways to, you know, keep those older workers. They certainly won't develop as much pension time if they're just coming back into an organization or to an organization at an older age as with the younger workers who have their entire careers ahead of them. You know, and you want to have that experience that, again, we talked about organizational brain drain. They know what works. They've been there, done that, saw all the attempts at the special projects, and they can help solve problems, and they're all typically willing to do that. Plus, not to mention, they have huge social capital, which comes through their connection with our customers. You know, they've got, say you've got an officer in a housing unit that has several years under his belt. He's going to have a relationship with the other employees, with even the offenders in that housing unit that the new folks aren't going to have. And that can make the difference of what runs smoothly during a shift as opposed to what doesn't. So when we get down to training for success, these are some things that, you know, you need to consider. All of you that are in training and staff development, these factors are necessary in order for training to work. You got to have trainees that are motivated to learn. And I've always told employees that develop curriculum, you got to answer the why question, the with them question, what's in it for me? You know, and then as you think about these generational groups, you may have some that are more motivated to learn than others. And then, of course, you've got your, I guess, your old wet dogs that are just going to lay around, and you can deliver training on a silver platter and they won't be motivated. But you'll have to also assess what your trainee's ability is to learn. You know, are you presenting something to somebody that's not in their wheelhouse? You know, even with their experience and previous training, this is beyond their ability to do. And you need to be able to know that going into a session. Learning has to be reinforced. And it's just, again, that's obviously something we all work toward, you know, applying what is taught in the classroom, practicing the information, communicating effectively, and having that job transfer. Now, the big push for folks in this business is being able to determine and demonstrate how what you do translates to, you know, saving money, being more efficient, making the agency more effective, and all these things, all these considerations go into that. We offered up this discussion today about the generations as just kind of a way to get you thinking differently about how to approach what you do. And you know, looking and making sure that as we communicate, we're doing it on a level that is respectful to all the folks that we have to service. So are there any questions? Y'all are being very quiet. Patty's good. This is like taking a 50-pound bag of sugar and putting it into a 10-pound bag. There's a lot of content that goes along with diving deep into this topic of working in a multi-generational workforce. I wanted to mostly present these 4 things for your consideration, for your information today. And if there's anything else that I can help you with around this subject, don't hesitate to send me an email. I'm out there available. It's tracy.reveal@odrc.state.oh.us. And so, if there are no other, I'm checking one more time. There are no other questions. Thank you all for joining us here today for our very, very first webinar. If you want to shoot me an email afterwards, let me know what difficulties you may have had, what things might have helped you better. I would definitely appreciate that, because this is something that we only look to do more of, and we want to make sure it's as best as we can